Political issues with the flags aside, I will say the Union Jack did look a little bit cooler on this thing. Hello, interwebs. Yes, it is once again time for yet another Disney Plus Marvel show, because that's the world that we live in now, and I'm honestly kind of not complaining about it. But this time, we have the new show, What If, which I was actually really, really pumped about when I heard what it was going to be, that it was going to be sort of like singular one-off tales, sort of what if, like alternate histories of the different Marvel Universe people with the actual actors, or at least a lot of the actual actors from the MCU. I always liked the Elseworld tales in comics, mostly as a DC fan, but I loved the other like what if comics when I was a kid. I always love alternate dimension stories. I love this like idea that like one choice can change a universe and change a completely different outcome. I always liked that idea. And even more so, I was excited for the show after Loki, because it really felt like this show was really tying itself into that multiverse idea after we sort of exploded it out at the end of Loki. And I feel like this show is a great way to introduce people to the multiverse while also not really kind of being overly burdened by it in a lot of ways, just telling one-off tales, and it doesn't necessarily need to feel like it's super weighty or anything. It can just be a lot of fun. And that's what this episode is, because our first episode up here with Marvel What If is Captain Carter, bringing back Hayley Atwell to the role of Captain Carter, the one that everyone loves, and basically showing what would happen if Captain Carter became Captain America or got the super soldier serum. And honestly, I should say this episode was a lot of fun to see overall. I really loved a lot of the actors coming back into this role. I mean, Hayley Atwell, number one, she brought just energy and such fun into this role. I think you can really feel that during the scenes that like where she's making jokes and getting to be a little bit over the top. Like the very first action sequence in this, where she's sort of being of all the guide and she's sort of making all these quips, like "Where have you been all my life?" to the Shield, was absolutely wonderful and hysterical, and you really could see that she was reveling in this role. And you see that with a lot of the different actors in here too. I forget his name, but the actor from The Walking Dead who sort of took over the Red Skull role plays Red Skull here, and he's doing his best. Viggo Mortensen. Oh my God, Elrond. Viggo Mortensen. I'm just mixing up my Lord of the Rings actors. Regardless, though, he's doing a lot of fun. He's having a lot of fun here. A lot of the actors are having a lot of fun, and I think most of them do a spectacular job. Even the actor here who plays Steve Rogers, who isn't actually Chris Evans, does a really good impression of Chris Evans. And as much as I miss my lovely Chris Evans not being here, great job on that front. So the actors are all wonderful. I think the only notable exception would be Sebastian Stan, who kind of really felt like he was reading lines in a voiceover booth. I could really it felt a little bit forced in to hear his voice. But regardless of that, everyone just seems to be having a lot of fun. And this story was honestly just a lot of fun. It kind of was basically a retelling of Captain America the First Avenger, but with kind of a reskin with Captain Carter in the role, and kind of going through slightly different beats, but very similar ones. I mean, we even get like the train sequence again, where we have the death of someone. And I actually like that there was sort of a twist on this, that Steve Rogers was the one that died in that sequence instead of Bucky, sort of playing on our expectations, and then actually subverting them even later on when Steve came back. So it's sort of like playing on our expectations from what we know from what actually happens in the universe, but then trying to do something a little bit different with it, but kind of playing on that on top of it. So that was a lot of fun, but I think this is also a smart idea, because I'm sure the rest of these What If episodes are going to get way more far afield, but this one just really felt kind of very familiar in tone. But the changes that did happen here, I thought were a lot of fun. I really liked seeing Captain Carter sort of discuss the sexism that she was facing. I mean, there's a lot of frustration that she was feeling. I mean, it was the similar beats that Chris Evans had to go through in his sorry, guys, I'm mixing up Chris Evans and Steve Rogers. It was the same thing that Steve had to go through in the initial movie, but sort of in a different way, in a different vein. I think the episode kind of hit a little bit on the sexism a little bit too hard. I mean, there's a lot of jokes on it, especially in the top half, but I get that it's a 30 minutes, so they really kind of want to bring that home. But I also really loved the moment later on when it sort of paid off, where Carter sort of discusses how now that she's beating up people, now that she's the super soldier, and as seen as that, she gets to be respected. She doesn't have to fight to be heard. I thought that was a nice little note and a nice little nod to some of the sexism that women can face just existing in a space and not getting enough respect, not being heard, not being listened to. And I like that little acknowledgement, and show how like her becoming more masculine seeming. Not that she's actually more masculine. She doesn't, she still retains her femininity in that sort of way. But I just like that acknowledgement that when she's beating up people, she somehow gets more respect. And I thought that was like a cool little acknowledgement in the episode. I should also mention too, I really liked the animation animation here. I've never been a huge fan of this animation style, this sort of like 3D cell shaded kind of look. I like it in video games from time to time. Whenever I've seen it crop up in animation, it always feels very stiff and wooden and not very expressive. But Marvel clearly put a lot of money into this because the character faces and models feel really expressive and really fluid, and I'm not used to seeing that in this type of animation style. So kudos to them to make an animation style really feel like it works and really feels like it's fluid. It's not 100% there for me. There's still some moments where the faces feel a little bit off to me. They seem a little bit strange, so it's not my favorite animation style by any means, but this is probably the best version of this type of animation that I've seen done. On top of that, though, the cinematography was absolutely wonderful. There's some beautiful shots and beautiful images done with this animation style, so kudos to them. I think they did a really good job. Again, not my favorite, but overall, really excellent. Some of the things that I want to mention here, too, I really loved Steve Rogers sort of being very self-effacing and still supportive of Carter. I mean, it would have been an easy route to see him be jealous that he didn't get the super soldier serum. But again, Steve Rogers is wonderful and amazing and beautiful to his core because I love him so much. And I just adored that he was supportive of Carter in every way. And there was no sense of jealousy or anything with him. It was just a very sweet, and their romance just playing off in that different dynamic was really wonderful and believable. And I liked that there didn't, like her getting the super soldier serum didn't have anything between them. You so rarely see a shooing of that sort of type of toxic relationship. It would have been a very easy story beat to go down here with them, and I'm glad that they didn't go that route, and I just thought that was a lot of fun. Also, I really loved the montage sequence set to 1940s like sort of music with Peggy beating up everybody. That was just a lot of fun. Great time. I liked seeing it intercut with the guy sort of taking credit for all the stuff that he was pushing back against. Also kind of a little bit of a subtle commentary about how men treat women there and sort of take the credit and get all the accolades for it, for all the work of women. Thought that was a nice little subtle bit, but it was just a fun little sequence that was kind of reminiscent of the Captain America sequence where Steve was sort of dancing on stage and fighting people in the original movie. So that was kind of nice to see, and I kind of really enjoyed that. Also, the fun little cameos of Samuel L. Jackson and Jeremy Renner at the end of the episode was nice and fun, but knowing that I think that they're both going to be appearing in future episodes of the series, I wasn't particularly surprised, but it was nice to see them. It was a good little cameo, and it was nice to see them really tying the whole universe together and making it feel expansive and big and still fit like in this own version of the MCU rather than kind of limiting it a little bit. And I would really have loved to see what a Captain Carter universe would be and what would have happened beyond this point. So maybe we'll get to see it in What If at some point, but it was still a very fun sequence. The side of the story, though, that did kind of fall flat a little bit for me was the Red Skull bit. While I love the actor getting a chance to sort of revel in the Red Skull of it all, he feels very superfluous and just kind of there. I mean, obviously just sort of running through the beats that we saw in Captain America. However, one thing kind of confused me and annoyed me and kind of disappointed me a little bit because the episode sets up the Watcher, who I'll talk about at the end of this, sort of review. The Watcher sort of sets up this idea that there was one moment that changed things in this story, and it was the moment that Carter chose to stay in the room with Steve, and that's sort of what changed the entire trajectory of this universe. And I love that idea. I love this idea that it's just one small push in one direction or the other that completely changes a universe. That's the whole idea of What If that I really, really find intriguing, that just one difference makes a whole lot of difference. One choice makes a whole lot of difference. But what that means, though, is if it's one choice, certain things probably wouldn't be changed at all because they wouldn't have been affected by that choice. And that kind of comes down to the Red Skull's story, where a lot of the stuff he does is very similar to the movie, but then at the end, spoiler here, he sort of opens up a portal to a big tentacle monster, which, I mean, maybe I it's been a hot minute since I've seen Captain America: The First Avenger, but I don't remember him having a desire to summon a weird tentacle monster. I remember him using the Tesseract to, like, make weapons and stuff and gain power that way, not summon weird tentacle monsters. And so it just seemed like a weird swerve and kind of ruined this idea of, like, one choice makes a difference, because this doesn't seem like it naturally flowed out of Carter's choice, that he would suddenly now be off on saving a tentacle monster. Maybe I missed something and there's something I'm forgetting. You can all tell me in the comments, but for me that just seemed kind of weird. And kind of ruined a little bit of the fun of what if stories for me, because if it's about more than just one choice, then it's like, all right, well, this is just some weird random other universe, and I just kind of like the idea of it just being one choice that sets things off on a different trajectory. So that was probably my biggest negative of the episode, but overall I found it to be a lot of fun. I loved the action, I loved the story of it. It didn't knock my socks off. It was very similar to, like, Agent Carter and Captain America: The First Avenger, but I think that that's kind of what Marvel was going for. Wanted to start with something a little bit more familiar before going even crazier with it down the line. One last thing I will mention, though, too, because this seems like it'll be more part of the overarching story here. I love Jeffrey Wright as the Watcher here, sort of this like mystical, like what if sort of thing, different universes. But there's this implication at the end where he says, like, I never get involved. I never, interact with anything. And that just seems like a very clear setup to be like, well, if you feel like you're never going to get in, if he says he's never going to get involved, well, that's a check off statement or whatever, because I feel like he is going to get involved at some point down the line. And hopefully I'll be curious to see if this story starts to spiral off into the multiverse stuff that we saw going on at the end of Loki, that it's not just going to be what if stories, but things are going to go wrong, and the Watcher will start to play a more direct presence in the story. Just a little bit of theorizing, but it's a nice, interesting sort of little Chekhov's gun that they set up in this first episode with the Watcher, and I think Jeffrey Wright does a really fun job with the role, with what little we see of him so far here. So overall, I thought this was a lot of fun. Again, didn't knock my socks off, but I'm excited to see what comes next, and I'm intrigued by the implications, not only for this series, but possibly for the Marvel Universe beyond. But otherwise, it just seems like it'll be a little bit of a fun time. So beyond that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my review. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, just so everyone knows, my Star Trek Lower Decks review are not going to go up on this channel. They're going to go up on my main channel, where all my Star Trek reviews are going to go. But otherwise, all my other reviews will be here, so don't forget to subscribe here. I also have a Patreon, things for me yet, but beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy.